powerful spell. The sky turned black, and the villagers ran for their lives. Help, help, they cried. As soon as they dashed for the safety of the castle, the dragon is back. The dragon is back. The huge shape swooped down, blotting out the sun. At the last villager flung himself inside, puffing and panting. The heavy castle doors, made of solid steel, clanged shut, and the mighty bridge across the moat was drawn up. Hovering above the thick stone castle roof and walls is a giant green, scaly wings outstretched, was a huge and terrible dragon, the enemy of the village. Ooh. With a roar of rage, the dragon opened its vast jaws and blasted the castle with its fiery breath. Down, down below in the castle vaults, the villagers clung together in fright. But the castle stayed firm. Curses, snarled the dragon as it flew away. Just missed a tasty bite to eat. The villagers had been a target for the dragon almost every day since it had taken up residence in the nearby mountains. Tired of dining on sheep and goats, it hankered down for a nice fat villager. Fortunately, so far it had never been quick enough to catch one. The first time the dragon had swooped down, it was pure chance that it had not made off with the villager. It just so happened that everyone had been invited to the king for a barbecue in the king's castle grounds. Spotting a dragon coming their way, they realized at once, by the bloodthirsty way it was gnashing its huge jaws, that this was not a social call. With seconds to spare, they all fled to safety inside the castle, and the angry dragon flew off with the barbecued ox instead. After a narrow escape, a lookout was posted in a castle watchtower to sound an alarm if the dragon returned. It did, of course, shortly after it had finished the ox. So right after it finished the ox, it came by. Fortunately, the early warning system worked, and each time the alarm bell sounded, the villagers dashed into the castle and successfully escaped its clutches. All those heavy fire-breathing attacks on the castle had taken their toll. On the building, however, the fortress had withstood the dragon so far, but the latest attack had damaged it badly. The intense heat had cracked many of the stones. Everyone knew that if the dragon attacked again, the castle would tumble down, and they would all be in danger. Fortunately, help was at hand, but from a very unlikely source. Alberta, the absent-minded witch, happened to zoom over the mountains on her broomstick, just as the dragon was returning to its nest. Furious that it had once again failed to scoop up several delicious villagers, the dragon had opened its huge jaws wide and was about to roar with anger. But at that very moment, Alberta, who always traveled too fast and who never looked where she was going, sailed right into the dragon's open mouth. The dragon felt something hard and spiky lodge in the back of his throat. The broomstick was stuck there, with Alberta still aboard. To find yourself stuck in the back of a foul-smelling mouth of a dragon would be enough to send even the nicest witch off the deep end. Newts and toads, she snapped, thinking the dragon had the nerve to try and eat her. You've bitten off more than you can chew this time, dragon. Unaware of what happened, but feeling very uncomfortable, the dragon attempted to swallow, which infuriated Alberta even more. Raising her magic wand, she cast the most wounding spell she could think of. With this wand I now rule, she cried, and change you into a silly fool. Then she conjured herself back to the comfort of her own home for a little rest and restorative cup of slime tea. Blissfully ignorant of the fact that a powerful spell had been cast upon it, the dragon returned to its nest. It was relieved that whatever had gotten stuck in its throat was no longer there, and had no idea that it had been a witch. Later that day, however, it felt a little hungry. I'll show those villagers this time, the dragon promised itself, as it set off in search of a tasty human once again. But little did the dragon realize exactly what kind of show it would be putting on. "Dragon ahoy!" shouted out the sounding alarm. Bells as a familiar giant black shape appeared in the sky. The whole village was panic-stricken. They knew that the badly damaged castle wouldn't withstand another firebombing. If it tumbled down, the dragon would gobble them all up. But there was nowhere else to run, so preparing themselves for the worst, they shut themselves up inside the usual hidden well, away from the huge holes in the roof. They clung to each other for comfort and prayed that somehow they would be saved. And astonishingly enough, they were. The dreadful beating noise made by the dragon's vast wings came nearer and nearer. The blue sky, visible through the gaping holes of the ceiling, went black as the dragon hovered overhead. But the dreaded fiery jets of the dragon breath never came. When the enchanted dragon drew a deep breath and blew out with all its might, no sheets of flame shot out. Instead, millions of sweet-smelling flowers and petals fluttered downward, and fluttered downwards from its gaping jaws. The villagers stared in amazement as pretty petals floated through the holes above their heads and gathering in drifts around their feet. Scarcely able to believe its eyes either, the dragon gazed in horror as beautiful blossoms heaped below. Drawing a second breath deeper, the dragon attempted to obliterate all the beauty with his biggest firebolt he had ever produced. But this time, showers of delicious candy rained down on the castle, fell through the cracks of the ceiling, and gathered in heaps on the floor around the villagers. The furious dragon gave a loud roar of anguish, but Alberta's spell ensured that something just as silly as flowers and candy emerged from the fearsome-looking jaws. Instead of a spine-chilling bellow, the dragon started to yodel in a deep, rich, baryton tone, and found with it to its great embarrassment that it couldn't stop. So the dragon starts yodeling. "I love you," it sang to the astonished villagers. Inside the castle, everyone started to laugh as the dragon continued to yodel a love song to them. They laughed even harder. The dragon knew it was making a ridiculous spectacle of itself, but thanks to Alberta's spell, it couldn't do anything about it. Well, it could do something, the dragon realized. It could fly away and never come back. And that's exactly what the dragon did. "Good riddance to you, you silly fool." The king called after the dragon as it flew off over the castle walls as quickly as it could, still singing at the top of its voice. Then everyone enjoyed a wonderful feast of candy before they rebuilt the castle and lived happily ever after. Okay, so that's the end of the dragon story, guys. Any comments? Any questions you guys have? You can raise your hand now, and I can answer them for you. Okay, Melissa, just give me a sec. He's going to unmute you, Melissa. Steve, you got it? All right, what is it, Melissa? Could you hear the story good? It was a good story? It made sense? That's pretty funny how the dragon was spitting out some funny stuff because the witch cast a spell on him, eh? That's a creative story. All right. Okay, Melissa, any other questions? Comments? Okay. Chris, you got something for us, eh, Chris? We're going to... Oh, he's already got you.
You have to mute, Melissa first.
What's your? Do you want any comments or questions, Chris,
One second.
about the story?
You have to mute. I'm sorry, Chris. We have everybody. One second. I apologize, guys. Give me 30 seconds here.
Sorry, they're just trying to organize it.
All right. I apologize. Sorry, it was Chris.
So if I'm clear enough that you guys can hear me and understand the story, please raise your hand. I just want to make sure I'm reading at a pace you guys are understanding. Everybody can understand? Yeah. Awesome. Looks like most of you raised your hands. Yeah. Great.
So we still have comments from Chris, Tom, and JP.
I see you, John.
Okay, what's your question, Chris?
That's right.
Nothing, you're good?
Nothing, Chris? Okay. Do you just like the joke? Yeah. Okay, any more questions, guys?
No.
Anybody else? Oh, Tom, you had one? I'll have to unmute Tom there. Okay, Tom, can you hear me? Tom's still muted. Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. You had a question or anything? Or you're okay?
Yeah, I like all of what?
Do you have any comments or questions about the story? Or you're okay?
I like all three.
They're all good, eh? Yeah, this is a pretty cute book. So if you guys are ready to go on the next story.
Oh, 1 second, we just missed JP's comment.
Oh, sorry. Okay, go ahead, JP. I didn't see your hand up.
Yes.
Okay, what is it, JP? Hang on. Oh, sorry, he's unmuting you still. Okay. Yeah, it's relaxing, eh? You're feeling nice listening to the stories? Yeah. Awesome. Maybe this is something we could do on a regular basis if you guys enjoy it.
Mel has a question from
Oh, sorry. Mel as well.
Hi, Mel.
Hi, Mel. Did you have a question? Are you enjoying the stories? Okay.
He likes to listen to the stories, that's for sure.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so the next one, guys, is called Silly Till. Looks like Till is a big monkey, if you can see on the page. Silly Till. Okay. All right, so Silly Till is a big monkey. Okay, there once was a girl named Jill Martin, and she always thought she knew best. Once she took pity on a gorilla at a local zoo. She decided he would much rather live with her than with his wife and babies in the jungle like that park. Sorry. Oh, sorry, guys. She decided he would much rather live with her than with his wife and babies in the jungle-like park that had been designed specifically for them. So one night, she crept into the zoo and lured him out of his enclosure with a bunch of bananas while his family was sleeping. They caught the bus back to her house, and when the driver made a fuss and said it was against the rules to carry huge apes, Jill told him not to be ridiculous and threatened to report him. But the gorilla would not sit still. He leaped from seat to seat and drummed his chest until the bus shook. Ah! The driver called him a public nuisance and drove him straight back to the zoo. Everyone could see he would be much happier there, except Jill. You got a question, Steve? Oh, is there a question? Whenever anyone tried to stop her from doing anything, Jill would simply reply, "Oh, don't be silly. I know exactly what I'm doing." She would go ahead and do it, and very often the results were disastrous. No one tried to stop Jill from doing silly things at home, which made her even worse. She was an only child, and she could do no wrong in the eyes of her parents. They spoiled her terribly and always agreed to everything she demanded. When Jill's parents took her to the circus for her birthday, she insisted that she could do the high wire better than the acrobats. Her mother and father just said, "Of course you can, darling." If another child had told her parents that they probably wouldn't have really meant it. But Jill was truly convinced that she could somersault from one trapeze to the other and ride on a unicycle across the high wire. Other parents would have tried to stop their child from trying anything that dangerous, but Jill's parents were just as silly as Jill. So they let her try it. The ringmaster tried to stop them. He cracked his whip and twirled his mustache ferociously. But Jill's parents were determined to let their daughter do whatever she wanted to do. They were insistent and offered him so much money that finally he did. It was bound to be a disaster, as anyone could have told Jill. In fact, it was a hilarious disaster. She did everything so horribly wrong, it looked like a comedy routine. She flew backwards off the unicycle as it gathered speed along the high wire, looped and landed into the arms of a clown. She missed the trapeze and flew into an open mouth of the cannon, was shot out again, and was finally caught by an acrobat. Everyone cheered and said it was the funniest thing they had ever seen. Jill, of course, never realized that the joke was on her. School was a really big problem for Jill, since she always felt she knew best. It was very, very difficult to teach her anything at all. One day, she read a story in a newspaper about a schoolgirl who was so good at chemistry that she had been allowed to study at college with much older people, even though she was only 10. "Oh, I could do that," scoffed Jill. "That's nothing." And as usual, her doting parents replied, "Of course you can, darling. Chemistry is something you have to be sure to get exactly right." It was also the subject that Jill was most determined to be much better at than anyone else, especially better than the girl who had been such a genius at it. The trouble started at the next chemistry lesson. The rest of the class listened carefully to the chemistry teacher. She explained that in her next experiment, it was very important not to mix the wrong liquids. Under no circumstance should blue be mixed with red. "Ha," thought Jill, "I'll bet it works much better if you mix blue with red." And so without anyone seeing, she mixed blue and red. Bang! Jill's flask exploded the instant they were combined. And a stream of foul-smelling, smoking purple liquid poured onto the floor. "You silly, silly girl," shouted the chemistry teacher. "What have you done?" It was difficult to see exactly what Jill had done. The classroom was so full of smoke, but everyone started to feel what she had done almost immediately. "Help!" they shouted, as one by one they felt themselves being lifted off the floor. A really extraordinary thing had happened. The spilled liquid had made something like grass grow out of the floor, only instead of growing slowly, as grass usually does, this stuff was growing upwards in leaps and bounds, like a meadow that had gone mad. "Head for the door!" screamed the chemistry teacher, as the long weaving carpet of grass carried them all up towards the ceiling. It was almost like being on a roller coaster. So they all went, even Jill. They crawled across the narrow space that was still left as fast as they could, trying not to bang their heads on the lights, while the grassy carpet shot upwards in a huge mass. So you could see in the classroom, There's grass growing out of their classroom. They're trying to escape. See it, guys? Then just before they reached the door, the grassy carpet flowered. Fat buds burst into the brightly colored blooms. Everyone who had hay fever started sputtering and sneezing. Luckily, the classroom door was open. They sneezed their way out before the grassy carpet filled the room, and then tumbled out into the corridor. Chasing the last children out of the door, "Run for it," commanded the teacher, pressing the fire alarm to alert the rest of the school. And 800 children, including Jill, 30 teachers and caretaker, and the cat raced for the safety of the schoolyard, even the cat. Just before the school was completely swallowed up by a carpet of grass. It took every firefighter in town a week to cut the carpet down, and for months afterwards it still spouted the occasional flower. The school had been closed, of course, while the giant carpet was cut, mowed, rolled, and finally brought under control. The principal was furious with Jill when she had heard how it had all started. "Your silly, thoughtless behavior could have destroyed the school and everyone in it," she told her. "I hope this has taught you a lesson, and you know now that not to think you know better than anyone else." Fortunately for Jill and the school, it had taught her a lesson that she never forgot. From that dreadful day on, she stopped insisting she knew best. And to everyone's relief, there were no more disasters. In fact, Jill's terrible mistake turned out to be a fantastic opportunity for the school. A high-ranking army officer heard about Jill's silly experiment and was amazed at the result. He decided that a quick-growing carpet would be an excellent weapon. He paid the school a lot of money for the details of Jill's purple mixture. This meant that the school was able to build a swimming pool, ice rink, a bowling alley for the whole town to use. And it wasn't long before Jill mended her ways and really did become a star pupil. But everyone still knew her as Silly Jill. Okay, that was the final story, guys. So that's Silly Jill. Sorry, I said Silly Till. It's kind of weird writing. I couldn't really tell that was a J. But yeah, so those are the stories we had planned today, guys. I hope you really enjoyed them. Is there any more questions or comments you guys would like to make before we until we end our workshop here? Maybe you could probably just unmute them. Okay, so you're all unmuted. If you have something to say, any questions, comments, now is your time to